Today's video is sponsored by DistroKid. They are a music distribution platform that's geared towards DIY artists and producers, much like myself and possibly you. They have a bunch of free promotional tools to choose from, and there's one called Hyperfollow, which is essentially a link in bio link. I use it across all of my social medias and also on each single that I release. More on this later in the video. As a creator, I am someone who likes to respond to my audience. And so that's the main reason for coming up with this video, to respond to you guys as fluently as I possibly can with a video. So I'm expanding past the comment section where on this subject on a regular basis, egos get involved and definitions just get completely lost. So now in the future, instead of arguing with haters or people who don't like the definition Dawless, I could just refer you to this video to give you a clear idea of what I'm talking about. Besides the comment section, there's actually, I think, a pretty good reason for making this video. Some people, myself included, understand and don't really mind this new-ish term, Dawless. And there's quite a few people who just don't like the term at all. I'm not sure if it's because they don't understand it or maybe they just don't like new current terms. Beats actually made an appearance in one of my previous videos and he mentioned like his definition of what Dawless is. His general take is that Dawless can be seen as like a counterculture to the way that most people are making music these days, like in the box, at a desktop, in their DAW, watching a screen. Logic Pro, Ableton, coming up with a product. And nowadays, if you're an aspiring producer, you're gonna have to get proficient at a DAW. It's part of the game. You have to do it. It's inevitable. But many people, hobbyists if you will, work a 9-to-5 job where they're just staring at a computer screen for like 8+ hours a day. And the last thing they want to do when they get home is create music on another screen. They've had enough of that. Or even professional performers. There's something about not having to look at a screen. There's something about not having a laptop on stage and just having like gear that's specifically designed for performance. Having a bunch of knobs and hardware does really feel great. It changes the experience. And in terms of electronic music, like the performance realm of it, that's necessary as well. So hence these two groups of people, whether you're like an electronic music performer or you're a hobbyist who's working a 9-to-5, they resort to Dawless gear. But still, the term needs clarification based on so many of your guys' comments. So the term Dawless, maybe it's around 5 years old-ish, maybe a bit older, seven years. It's tied into and it's also in response to a specific moment in time, and it refers to a specific group of instruments that were created in the last maybe 10 or 12 years. So I'm not a Gen Xer or a baby boomer, so I can only give my millennial opinion on this one. If different generations have, comments or questions to add to this, we would all love to hear them in the comment section. If you're an older synth user, you probably remember a time where desktop DAWs didn't really exist and people just used hardware to create music. If you wanted to record professionally, you would spend a ton of money and go to a professional studio. Oftentimes you would need a band to get it done. That being said, there were still tools that are actually being used in today's little niches to do it DIY. Maybe recording to cassette with a Tascam Porta Studio, something like that. But that process was a lot more tedious than recording digitally today. And I think that in general, the product was not considered professional by the standards of that time, especially because it's a lot harder to mix using a Porta Studio on cassette unless you were to invest in much more expensive compressors, preamps, and stuff like that. And that's where you might just want to go to a studio. Gear in general was just way less capable and harder to understand how to use at that time because there wasn't that much information out there compared to today. Like there wasn't a selection of 15 videos the day that a product was released with like exactly how it sounds, how it syncs with other instruments, all the ins and outs of how to use it, how it sounds with other effects units. And it's like today, within a week of something being released, it's like you have like 50 videos to choose from and so much information. It's like, it's overwhelming. None of that. You bought an expensive instrument that could do one thing. It was super clunky. It would take up an entire corner of your room. Very singular in its use. It might not have sat well with you, in which case I guess you would just sell it. In my mind, like in the year 1990, it was probably just much more discouraging to pick up an electronic instrument for all the reasons that I just mentioned. And yeah, today we are spoiled. And so my main takeaways from all these points is that during that era, electronic music making was dominated by clunky hardware. Synths, compressors, giant tape machines, preamps, drum machines. And don't get me wrong, in most cases, I think that this gear actually still sounds better to this day. Is it practical? No. So over time, just because of the way that capitalism and tech works, electronic music making became much more accessible. And so that brings us to today, where there's a much wider audience that's actually able to afford this gear and is interested. Fast forward to 2005, 2006, by maybe 2010, DAWs have completely taken over music making. This term DAW, digital audio workstation, is something you heard all the time. You still hear all the time because it's dominating. It became the centerpiece, the brain of everyone's studio, and with good reason. Producers still to this day get tribal about which DAW is the best. During this period, slowly but surely, everything that you need to know about music making, whether it's a DAW or Dawless, is being documented on YouTube for free. You can now produce an absolute banger from your laptop at 18 years old, and from a purchasing standpoint, you know exactly what you're going to be purchasing, exactly how it sounds, which hit records said gear or software is being used on, and like specific presets on how to achieve those sounds. Everything is 50 times less expensive. You don't need 50 synths in an expensive studio anymore when you have something like Omnisphere. Although I actually think that Omnisphere already sounds outdated, but I needed to incorporate this meme. Software compressors are now pretty much indistinguishable from real ones. Many artists have now learned how to use DAWs and become producers, and even just like everyday hobbyists. Everyone now is sitting in front of a screen all day long, using the best possible tool to make music. It's all in one place. And at the very least, even in expensive studios with tons of gear, the brain of the operation is always going to be a DAW at a laptop. And of course, I'm sure that there's always been a Dawless camp that was just never really interested in recording into a laptop. They never got around to doing it. But the label Dawless didn't really become popular in this little niche until maybe 5 or 6 years ago. It wasn't like hardware electronic instruments just stopped selling during the rise of DAWs. We're obviously a much smaller group of people, but there's still a big enough demand for hardware users. And actually a really interesting comparison I heard recently, that the synth electronic music industry is comparable to the sports fishing industry. The hardware has become much more affordable, much more portable, and let's be real, much more cheaply made. You've got these do-it-all type instruments, grooveboxes that have come out of it. You could record parts into them, you could use them as samplers, they're synths, sequencers. You could use them as the brain of the operation to control other gear. There might be a mixer built into them as well. Essentially, you can create a track from start to finish, much like a desktop DAW, but with a completely unique and fresh workflow in comparison. Definitely a little bit more limited workflow, but that may spark creativity. That's kind of the point. And on top of that, with grooveboxes, they're specifically designed for you to perform the tracks that you've composed within the unit. Many of them also include built-in effects and/or track mute or unmute. In terms of electronic instruments, the do-it-all machines, the grooveboxes, are the ones that I would call Dawless. Like if you use the Digitac, let's say, which is actually marketed as a drum machine, but most people use it as a groovebox, myself included. It's been my Dawless centerpiece for a while now, and I have a really easy time completing tracks with it. It's a very interesting workflow that's fluid. I come up with parts and ideas that I would never come up with on a desktop DAW because of the limits. In this example, the Digitac is also a great piece of gear to perform tracks, so why not just compose the tracks straight into the unit and then perform them? It seems like the easiest way to do it. Alternatively, so something like the JU06A or the HydraSynth Explorer, these are two other synths that I have, and that's what they are. They're just synths. They're not Dawless instruments on their own because they are not a digital audio workstation. They're just a synth. You can't really have a Dawless performance unless there's a brain that's able to control everything. And that in itself is a digital audio workstation, but it doesn't require a desktop digital audio workstation to function. You see what I'm getting at? Inversely, another example is Ableton Live. A lot of people use that for live performances. So let's say you pair Ableton Live and you sync it up with a Dawless instrument like the Digitac. This is no longer a Dawless performance because you're using a desktop DAW, but the instruments that you may be using can be considered Dawless because they are a brain within themselves. Some of you might think that this is just like trivial, but the amount of comments that I get regarding this whole topic, I just felt like this video needed to be made. And of course, like with everything in life, there is a gray area. A great example of this is the MPC-1, which is a Dawless instrument, but it's specifically designed to imitate a desktop DAW. That's basically what it is. It's a portable desktop DAW, which is why a lot of people use the term DAW in a box because it has that like grid style workflow. Also just the way that VSTs and effects are integrated into the instrument, the way buses work. It's a DAW, it's a DAW, a desktop DAW. So I guess that one's kind of up for debate. Another tricky one is the Tascam Portastudio, which is something I use all the time. It's been around since what, like the mid 80s or 90s. The term Dawless did not exist at that time. By today's standards, would I consider it to be Dawless? Maybe, but you're recording to tape, which is analog, so it's not digital. It is a way of creating music without sitting at your laptop, so we've kind of come full circle on this one in a way. I could just imagine as someone who was creating music maybe in the 80s or 90s with something like the Tascam Portastudio, and then to see it resurge itself, and for all these young bucks to be using the term Dawless, and then this new like hip term gets used as like a buzzword in this little niche. I get it. I get why people are a little bit agitated about it, perhaps. In my mind though, is it enough to leave like a rude rant on Reddit? I don't think so. Hopefully this clears things up with some of you. Now I have like a very specific video in response to your comments. And now more about DistroKid and Hyperfollow, the free link in bio link. It's kind of a curveball because DistroKid isn't a platform that you'd expect to be offering this sort of free promotional tool. You can put together multiple centralized link hubs at no extra charge with a lot of the same features as paid tiers from other platforms. I'll show you mine, but first I'm one of DistroKid's most active creators, and so they gave me this special discount link for you guys to use in case you're not a member already. Go to hyperfollow.com and reserve your username. From there you can fill out your info. As a side note, other platforms charge you specifically for ad tracking, whereas DistroKid offers this for free. And so here's the final result. My latest single is embedded right here, my latest YouTube video, social links, other important links I'd like to lead people to. It's all there. For me personally, I find that this is the most useful tool that DistroKid offers, and it's really just one of many reasons to join. Thanks so much everyone for watching. If you'd like to dive into some deeper conversations about Dawless, you could join my Discord. Link for that is in the description. In terms of synths and Dawless, we're very helpful with each other over in that community, so yeah, come join us. You could also always text me if you have any specific questions. I do get back to you guys. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope to see you guys very soon.